Welcome to AGAPE Social Justice, where we focus on love, truth, and justice. This is one of those episodes, like I've told you before, trust me, you want to go ahead and reach out to someone and invite them to come in. But what I'm going to ask you to do today is reach out to someone that maybe even in the last 2 to 3 years during the pandemic that you have not spoken to. And maybe it's because you've had a conflict. There's some polarized discussions that have taken place, and you haven't quite figured out how to have that conversation that you need to have with that person. Well, today I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine named Marco. And my hope is that as you hear the conversation that we have today, that'll give you the courage to reach out to that friend that you no longer talk to, or maybe give you the courage to reach out to someone you don't know. So feel free to reach out and tune in, engage, and I'm looking forward to having some conversation with you after this episode airs. So Marco, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this is one of the most important episodes that I will probably ever do. I really do. I want to start out by you introducing yourself.
Okay.
And then after we do that, let's just jump right into it. Have a natural conversation in terms of how we met, some of the conversations that we've had along the way, and where you and I see this opportunity working out for other people and how they can form the relationship and friendship that we have.
All right.
Okay.
Well, my name is Marco Antonio da Silva. It's a Portuguese-Italian name used in Europe. And I was born in Brazil. You can tell by my accent that I'm American, Native American. And I am married. I have 4 daughters. I have a beautiful wife. They are all beautiful Brazilian women. It's the answers to my question, to my request to God, to my prayers. I asked God to be surrounded by beautiful Brazilian women, and He gave me 4 daughters. So I've been here for 22 years. I'm 63. I've been living in Brazil for 2/3 of my life and 1/3 of my life here. So I'm a 22-year-old American.
Okay. Love it. And one of the things that you're passionate about is unity. And you and I met through an organization called Braver Angels. And with Braver Angels, they've worked to bring people together from different political beliefs, right? And so we participated in a workshop that was first of its kind. They had never done a workshop talking about gun safety, gun control, right? The controversial topic that is on everyone's mind today. And what they did for our workshop is that we did a little bit of skill building. And then we also had a common ground workshop infused into that, which made it very unique. And the focus that we talked about was firearms and violence, right? When we come together, they identify us as either red or as blue.
Right.
My background, or what I lean toward, tends to be the Democratic side of politics, and for you were considered red.
Right.
Tell our listening audience about our experience when you came into the workshop. What were you thinking when you first got involved? How did you even find out about it?
It was a totally different mindset before we started the conversation. When we left, which was about 3 hours long, I think it was the workshop. So I asked some friends to come with me, and I didn't personally like the idea of being labeled in such a way. I think there are labels as Republican or Democrats or Christian, and there's a spectrum of beliefs even inside those labels.
Right.
So it's only when you start talking to the person and you get to know the person, and maybe like my mother said, well, it takes a whole pack of salt until you get to know somebody. When you're cooking, you gotta get rid of the pack of salt, 1 pound of salt. And I think she was right. It takes time to get to know people, what they stand, And so it's unfortunate that people are not talking, having a conversation anymore. And I saw that as an opportunity. I was invited by Hillary to participate. And she said, and I looking for all opportunities I have to have a conversation with people. I like to philosophize. I like to talk about the important questions of life. And when I got there, I invited some friends to come along with me and participate. And I was surprised that many of them didn't want to take part of it. It's a waste of time. They think different than us. And there is this idea that the other side doesn't understand what we are saying. So I took a chance, and I was impressed by, first, how their professionalism,
Yes.
how they run, and they facilitated the conversation.
Right.
Then I read more about it, and it has been created by professionals in facilitating conversations between people who are at the brink of a divorce. So these people know how to help people who think differently to sit
Right.
down and listen mainly. So I thought that the workshop was fantastic because we connected in an amazing way. We happened to be partners, right? So I
Right.
think when we first sat, one besides the other, oh, she's blue and I was red. But as time went on, we really connected very well.
I think
And
so.
it's amazing that we agreed with 95% of the things, right?
I know, right?
The common ground is what
I
it's all
keep
about.
I keep trying to tell people that if they would just take one step forward and just try it, you'd be surprised at the connections and the similarities that
Yeah.
you find in people. And I've even posted about my experiences on Twitter and other places, and I've had a couple of people respond because they don't believe it.
Yeah.
They don't believe that a Democrat and Republican with different viewpoints on something like gun safety can come together and have a civil
Yeah.
discussion.
And with that conversation, we didn't come to a 100% conclusion. We don't agree with everything.
Right.
And I think maybe the two of us were the most moderate of the group, right? From your group of three and from my group of three. But it's painful and it's work. It takes time, and we want to have a solution right now.
Right.
But one of the things, I came across a book recently called Jesus is the Question. We are familiar with Jesus is the Answer, but Jesus is the Question as a title I never heard before. So this gentleman, the author of the book, suggests that Jesus asked a lot more questions than he gave answers. In fact, he asked over 300 questions, and he literally specifically answered only 3. Have you ever heard of these numbers before?
No.
And he wrote a book about it because he was surprised by that too. So over 300 that he asked people, over 180 questions that they asked him, but only 3 he directly answered. So I haven't finished the book yet. I'll tell you more about it. But it sounds amazing. But the way it suggests is that a question opens a conversation, opens the door to a relationship, and an answer closes the door. Because once you give an answer, it closes the door, and that's it.
It's an interesting perspective.
It is. So communication is something that we are trying to figure it out. We need to, and I'm a talkative guy in my own language, and learning English was a challenge, but it helped me to learn how to be quiet, because when you are trying to experience a new language, you're not fluent, you can't speak properly, and then you don't want to be embarrassed, you don't want to expose yourself, so you listen more. So that's a good practice just by learning a new language. Now that I'm fluent, I'm talking too much.
No, I think it's a good thing. I actually enjoyed the fact that while we were there, you were very open, you were very authentic, and I think coming into those spaces and just being vulnerable in that way makes a huge difference, right? I think there are people who come in and they've kind of prepared themselves like, I've got my data, I have these points I want to make sure I state to this person who doesn't think like me, and that really just doesn't work.
No.
Right? And that's typically what people do when they come into a conversation or they meet someone and there's conflict.
Yeah.
They're thinking in their head about what else can I say next.
Right.
And I feel like that's the difference. And also I think that the conversations that we've had about our faith have also, kind of drawn us together. And that's been the common link where everything else just kind of falls underneath that, right?
And when it comes to faith, for instance, right, how many different denominations, right, just Christianity has,
I know.
just because there's a difference between one verse or whatever
Right.
it is. So I think there is a natural tendency for human beings to separate themselves. There it looks like there is this force that is actually trying to put people aside. And it's a shame because this is a beautiful country. And um, I think it's the best place to live. I haven't lived in many places, but I know many countries in Europe, and I know South America. I know Brazil well. So this is an amazing country, and it's unfortunate what's happening right now that people are not willing to sit down and talk, because if we're gonna get anywhere, it's just by conversation. It's not gonna be via war. I
Hmm.
don't think.
Right. So why do you think that the Christian church is so polarized today? I mean, I've always thought that it is the church's place, right, to model, to being, a Christ follower means to love all people, to be able to work together and unite. I remember asking you a question about this when we were at Braver Angels,
Uh-huh.
just like it kind of baffles me how the evangelical
Uh-huh.
community has like tainted what people see in terms of Christians today.
Yeah. I think in part is pride. I think in part is pride. I'm right, you are wrong. That's part of it. And I think the setup, even the setup in how people, it's presumptions that one person believes that he knows everything theologically and is there to teach everyone. I like the I like that, that's one of the things I like about Braver Angels, that everyone has an opportunity to
Mhm.
speak.
Right.
And I also read a book about the power of introvert. My wife is
Mm.
introverted, and one of my daughters is introverted too. And they clearly showed us how wiser they are than us, because they spend more time listening than
Wow.
speaking. And corporations and churches are actually missing out how much contribution an introverted person can actually
Mm.
give, because they are listening most of the time, so they can figure it out and come up with a solution. My daughter Victoria, she is famous for that. Everybody's talking and arguing and all that, and all of a sudden she just puts a sentence there and closes
That's
everybody
it.
out. Yeah.
Wow. You just gave me an idea, and I've been so focused. I'm very passionate about living undivided classes as well. And I've been thinking about Braver Angels workshops in my community, which we
Hmm.
just had another workshop
Yeah.
that you participated in. But I hadn't really thought about bringing Braver Angels into the church.
Hmm.
But listening to you talk about how we need to develop that skill of
Yeah.
sitting and listening, that might actually be the key in
Yeah.
terms of figuring out how we can change the perspective
Yeah.
that people have when they think about the church, the Big C church, and how
Right.
they operate. So, yeah, I think I'm going to reach
Absolutely.
out to them.
The Bible talks about the power of the testimony,
Hmm.
how powerful it is. And there are very few things, if more influential than a testimony of a person.
I
When you
agree.
when you when they open their heart and they tell about something that they encounter, a difficulty or what it is,
Right.
it's powerful. And we can only enrich our lives if we take the time to listen to. And in circles, that's why I think this is more necessary than actually the formal teaching that it's done so much.
I
Um,
agree.
I think,
I agree.
and people sitting down, and unfortunately, the conversations happen at a cigar bar more like that, but it should happen everywhere.
I still want to come to the cigar bar, meet your friends, by the way. I remember we talked about that a few times,
Yeah,
and
people
I,
relax, men relax, and then they sometimes it gets emotional, passionate. People have an
hmm
idea, but
hmm
that's how guys especially are, right?
yeah, yeah.
But
I kind of want to walk in and shock them and be like, "Hey, I'm his friend who's a Democrat, ready to have a
oh yeah,
conversation with you and just see
Joe.
like where the conversation goes." Um, but I also wanted to talk about your unique background coming from Brazil.
Hmm.
So we had a homework assignment,
Yeah.
and you actually invited me to go to breakfast, and we were going over some of the information for this homework assignment. And you shared with me something that I admit I immediately, like seeing you, um, I would never think that you would have had an upbringing like mine. like that we would find similarities in terms of the community we lived in, what that environment was like. But it was only because you invited me to the table, right? To break bread with each other and to be able to talk through some of the
Right.
work that we were doing, that I figured that out. Can you share a little bit in terms of what your experience was like in Brazil?
Yeah, and it's part of the reason why I wanted to be part of Braver Angels too, is that in the 70s when I was growing up, as a 10-year-old boy, I saw my dad trading guns with the neighbors in the kitchen table. So I saw a gun. He asked me not to get close, or I could sit down and keep my hands down. And the reason why I learned later on my father was exchanging and trading guns with neighbors is that it was totally forbidden in the 70s. And it's still forbidden. And most people don't have it. So I think there are special occasions that they can have a license, but it's very rare.
Mhm.
I didn't know anybody in my adulthood who had a gun myself.
Wow.
People that I know that was going to work and going to school and all, nobody would carry a gun. So that was how I grew up. For 40 years, I lived down there. And so it was prohibited. So it's something that you can't keep from people smuggling in the black market and under the table deals. So, but my father and his neighbors wanted to protect their families. And a couple of decades later, I was working at General Motors Tech Center, and unfortunately, it's common for you to go to work in the morning and see a car in front of you stop by the traffic light, and then two guys on a motorcycle, a small motorcycle, coming between cars, and then take it. So there are 50 of us watching two young men on a motorcycle with revolvers, taking the driver, putting the trunk, or doing something else and driving away. And we are just watching. We can't do anything. So it was a common practice to get to the tech center and 8 a.m. and it's 8:30 in the morning. Robert didn't show up. We call his home and said, "Did Robert leave to come to work?" We had to talk to his wife or his mother. Yeah, he did. So we know that he was kidnapped in a traffic light because it's a common thing. So it's very unfortunate. It's we don't stay on the sidewalk just carrying a conversation because it's dangerous to be outside. And it's a big city, São Paulo, where I was born. It's 25 million people living there. It's a big city, but it's very unsafe. And I think that it's because good guys can't carry a gun. That's really what it is. And because the bad guys know that they are free to act.
To
And
terrorize.
that's what I saw for so many years. And and then I have my own numbers, my own data that I look into. So to me, when I first heard the express or the premise that the more guns, less violence, to me it made sense. And but I see that many people don't seem
Don't
to
agree
believe
that.
that way.
Right. Yeah. So I have I really appreciated you sharing that. One, because I just didn't have that perception, but then that opened me up to share more of my experiencing and my upbringing. I also grew up knowing that people had firearms, right, for protection and for safety because of where I grew up.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I mean, it was so commonplace because at that time, the police response was really terrible, right? And so if you wanted to protect your family, what did you do? You get a firearm.
Yeah.
Well, my experience, my lived experience is very different than a lot of other people who are Democrats,
Unique.
right?
Unique.
It's a unique experience. And so living in the suburbs and having the perspective that I have is often kind of like, is off-putting to them because they can't relate to it. And for us, I think when you grow up in an environment like that, safety is your number one priority and you do what you feel is required, in that instance to do that. And I didn't necessarily grow up being afraid of guns, right? I'm married to a retired law enforcement officer. We've always had guns in our home because of him being there. Our children know that. And so I kind of have a slightly different perspective. But I also remember in our conversation, you talked about having bars on the windows of your home, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, I grew up too in a home where we had bars, right? And my girls, they don't know anything about living like this. They've only really lived a suburban lifestyle. So when we've driven to go back to like my own neighborhood, my daughter one day was like, "What's those black things on the window?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then when I realized there were bars, that's when I think it hit me that this is not everybody's experience. It's a very unique experience. And I think what's beautiful about Braver Angels is that they allow us to come in from whatever our lived experience is and share a different perspective that someone may not have understood. Because right now, I can tell you, I probably can have 100 friends who would know that you don't agree with the same things we agree with in terms of the laws, but they will perceive you to be a certain way, not understanding what background you come from, right? What your experiences are. That's the beauty of Braver Angels.
We most people from Brazil who are here the first time and looking at the suburbs of in the U.S. are in awe. Are in awe that windows and there's no fence and there are windows and you don't have to be in a closed community with security guards at the door if you're a middle class. And because we are behind bars, we are protected behind bars. It's the only way. And so it's a strange thing, but it's visually even ugly. But that's reality how it is.
It is, and I think reality and of someone's lived experience needs to come into the conversation at every single table. If we stop making assumptions about each other and we actually start listening and talking about why do I feel the way that I feel or believe what I believe, I think we can actually find more common ground, which is exactly what the workshop did for us, right? Now, everybody does not walk away from Braver Angels having the same experience. Some people have walked away and they feel like I just can't do it. I can't work with them. You even said you have friends. I have friends who won't engage in this type of work. What do you think is the real barrier?
Well, one of them I know it's that people don't want to be labeled one way or another because they are afraid of what you have in mind or a conservative person is. The news is not helping in any way. And it's portraying everyone or a class of people one way or another. And that's part of the problem, I think. So the label, you are a Christian, you are a Brazilian, you are a Democrat, you are a Republican. What does that really mean until you sit down and you listen to the heart of the person, right? And it's what you said, authenticity is the most important thing, and you can sense and you can feel when a person is saying the truth to you. Look at their eyes, and so it needs to happen. Is people need to sit down but people are afraid. They are afraid to do that. So they, in both sides, I think they'd rather be quiet, even with their own relatives and people they love, and we learned that there were people there who were Democrat and who married Republican, and then you how do you talk about it? And we don't talk. So how the conversation is very superficial, and it's unfortunate, right? Because it came to the point that I know what you believe and you won't change, and I know what I believe I won't change, and then we won't talk anymore. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, there's so many families I feel like, and this is where for me, I almost want to cry, honestly, because there's so many families that are divided right now because they don't have the same political beliefs. And I feel like when 2020 hit, something shifted. Like people were so, myself included. I mean, I feel like I went through a roller coaster of emotions, over the last 3 years, just the hurt and the sadness and the anger and the disappointment and all the things that we went through. And one of the reasons why I wanted to start this company, because Agape Social Justice is an actual for-profit business, but we also have the show as well. And I wanted to do this because one of the things that I kept hearing in my spirit is that we have this problem because we are not living out agape love. And agape love means that I unconditionally love you because God loves you, right? Love God first and love your neighbor. Like to me, it's like so simple. These two commandments that we have that we are not doing a good job with.
No, we are
right? And I really believe that the more we lean into that message, then we will see a shift. And I have to say that I believe that part of the connection and like I feel this connectedness with you is because I feel the heart of God. Like it just kind of oozes out of you. And I've watched you in your interactions with other people, and that's what I see. It doesn't matter what they look like, it doesn't matter what they believe, but you kind of walk in that spirit.
I have a friend from Canada. He's a businessman. He used to go to China 35, 40 years ago. And he said that when you're about to make a deal, you don't have to speak the language. You don't see what the person looks like. You want to make a deal. And he got involved in negotiation with people in countryside of China without speaking the language, and he would make deals. And says that is, if you just let people exercise the free market, people just don't see anything else. They just want to make a deal together. And and that's what, we need to do something with our, let's paint a wall, let's build it. If people get more focused on work, build, create, instead of just disagreeing with everything, we would be in better shape, right?
I hope so. I hope so. My hope is that in this conversation and the work that we continue to do with Braver Angels, that we can give people hope, that we can give people encouragement to know like this is really real, like this is real, that we actually, talk and connect and communicate. It's not about agreeing 100% on everything, but finding those common areas. And even for what I don't believe or agree with, understanding your perspective and why that is, right? And being
further. Explain
exactly,
further,
and being okay with that. And so my hope is that people will see this, that they will reach out to someone else and extend the conversation. And then I also just wanted to say something before we close out too in our last minute, is that you came, kudos to you. I invited you to a predominantly Black movie screening and movie discussion, and you not only showed up, you actually stood up and you spoke and you welcomed anybody to come and meet with you and talk to you. So I just wanted to end on that note and saying I appreciate you doing that. And I look forward to more opportunities where we can have this discussion.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I'll
Thank
be
you
there.
so much. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
coming. Yeah, to our listening audience, I know what we're talking about is much harder when you are trying to implement it and thinking about it. Trust me, I know it's true. I have friends who I also need to reach out to and try to reconcile and have conversations with because we haven't had those in-depth discussions yet. But I encourage you to walk alongside me and let's do this work. Let's do the hard work that you and I both know that we need to do, not only for ourselves, but for our families, for our communities, and I honestly believe for the sake of this country. Let's do the hard work of reconciling with one another so that we can have the democracy that our children and our grandchildren deserve. And until next time, please tune in, follow us on social media, and we look forward to seeing you for the next episode. Thank you so much.